The astronaut looked at planet Earth from space. The three kings looked at the star in the night sky when they were going through the desert. The customer in the supermarket looked at her shopping list. The businesswoman looked at the printer and held her head in despair. The young woman leaned against the wall and looked at her mobile phone. The man looked at the food in the microwave oven. The boy stood near the window and looked outside the window. He looked at the stars. The young couple held each other and looked at their brand new house. The woman looked at the camera while she was shopping in the grocery store. The businessman looked at his watch on his wrist. He was late for his flight. The woman looked at me and flirted seductively with me when I was speaking to her in the coffee shop. The woman looked at the mountains. The woman looked at a beautiful dress through the shop window. She was window shopping with her husband. The businessman looked at the city from the top of the building. The man looked at his watch. He was late for work. The confident businesswoman looked at the camera while she was standing on the street. The businesswoman looked at her work diary. The girl looked at the sunset. The businessman looked at the map. The woman looked at her mobile phone and could not believe what she had just read. The businessman looked at himself in the mirror. The smiling woman with a bag on her shoulder looked at a text message on her phone. The man looked at the computer screen. The security officer looked at the CCTV footage. The young child looked at something through the magnifying glass. The man looked at another woman. His girlfriend was not happy. The man looked at his home security cameras on his tablet. The smiling young woman looked at her laptop screen. The woman looked for something in the fridge. The woman looked for a job in the newspaper without any success. The smiling young woman looked for something on the internet. The man looked for something under the chest of drawers. The young woman looked for her purse in her car. The cyclist looked for something in his bag. The young woman went to her wardrobe and looked for something to wear for her date tonight. The young woman with red hair looked for her mobile phone in her handbag. The woman looked for a document in the filing cabinet. The man looked for a hotel room for the night when he arrived in Paris. The security guard looked for the burglar with his flashlight. The young woman looked for a book in the library. The golfer looked for his golf ball in the long grass. The homeless people looked for food in the bins. The group of friends looked for their destination on the map. The man looked for buried treasure at the beach with a metal detector. The golfer looked for his ball in the grass. The man looked for his keys in the couch. The couple, who are on holiday looked for a restaurant to get something to eat. The pirates looked for buried treasure. X marks the spot. The businesswoman looked for something in her briefcase. The man looked for a plumber in the yellow pages. The woman looked for something in her chest of drawers. The woman looked on the chemist's shelf for headache tablets. She had a really bad headache. The football team looked everywhere for the perfect manager. The woman looked for her glasses when she woke up. The driver of the car looked for a parking space. The woman looked for a new house to buy on the internet. The man looked for a shirt to wear before he went out on his date. The man looked for information about the COVID-19 virus. The man, who was wearing a blindfold, looked for the next bright idea. The man looked for something for tonight's dinner in the supermarket. The man looked for the truth everywhere. The burglar looked everywhere in the house for jewelry. The businessman in the maze looked for financial success. The man in the blue jeans looked for socks in the washing machine. The secretary looked for a file in the filing cabinet when she was in the office. The woman looked for shells when she was at the beach. The young couple looked for Christmas gifts online for their family. The cashier looked for change to give to the customer. The man, who was sitting at his computer, looked for recipes on the internet. The couple looked for something inside the cardboard box. The secretary looked for a pen in the drawer. The man looked for a movie to watch on Netflix. The student looked for a book to read in the library. The man looked for a discount when he went shopping. The man looked up to see the blue sky. The man looked up to see the blue sky. The group of people looked up to the sky and saw Superman. The girl looked up at the stars and saw a shooting star. The man, who was wearing glasses, looked up to the left to see the clock. The man in the blue shirt looked up at the ceiling. The boy looked up at the tree and started to climb it. The cameraman looked up at the trees. The man looked up at the skyscrapers and saw an airplane in the sky. The students in the class looked up at the blackboard. The baby looked up at his mum. The dog looked up at his owner. The preacher looked up at the sky for divine inspiration. The climbers looked up when they were climbing the mountain. The athlete looked up to the crowd in the stadium when he held the trophy. The man looked up a word in the dictionary. The young woman looked down to the ground. The medical doctors looked down at the patient. The man in the blue jeans looked down at the ground. The teenagers looked down from the balcony. The priest looked down at the Bible. The man in the blue jeans looked down from the top of the wall. The woman looked down at the water from the bridge. The puppy looked down at his empty bowl. The surgeon looked down at the patient when he was operating on the patient. The woman looked down when she was reading the book. The man looked down from the top of the ladder. The female hiker looked down from the top of the mountain. The cameraman looked down from the top of the skyscraper. The teenager, who was lying on his bed, looked down at his laptop while he was working. He was wearing headphones. The pregnant woman looked down at her belly. The boy in the playground looked down the slide. The birds looked down at humanity from the sky. The two women looked down from the bridge. The happy woman looked down at the weighing scales. The man looked down from the top of the stairs. The woman looked down when she was going down the elevator. The teenage girl looked in the mirror at the spot on her face. The baby looked in the mirror and saw his reflection. The cat looked in the mirror and saw itself as a lion. The woman looked in the car boot for something. The curious man looked through a magnifying glass. The child looked through a hole in the cardboard box. The businessman looked through the binoculars and saw something very interesting. The man looked through the window blinds. The woman looked through a telescope. The young beautiful woman, who was hiking in the mountains, looked back at the beautiful scenery. The cat turned her head around and looked back. The driver of the car looked back at the passengers in the back of the car. The woman opened the box, unpacked the box and then looked inside the box. The businessman looked ahead to the year 2021. The man looked to the right and to the left when he crossed the road. The sad couple sat on a couch and looked in different directions. The dog stood on his two legs and looked out of the window. He was waiting for his owner. The woman opened the curtains and looked out of the window. The young woman sat on the window ledge and looked out of the window while it was snowing. The cat looked out of the box. The man, who was sitting on the train, looked out of the train window. The teenage driver looked out of the car window. The movie star looked out of the window to wave to her fans. The dog looked out of the airplane window. The woman leaned out and looked out of the car window. The businessman looked out of the window.